what they say, you're only 29 once.
Actually, that's not true. You're 29 like an infinite amount of times.
Ooh. This is the kind of philosophy that I'm into.
You know how they say a broken clock is right twice a day? Untrue. A broken clock is right an infinite amount of times a day.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, hell
The
yeah.
assumption is that you're talking about a minute or before, like you were talking about a year, you know? But I think highly of myself, too highly of myself, so I think about these things, you know?
Yeah, Mr. 0.035 seconds in neon white over here. God damn, dude.
A winner's a winner, dude.
Speaking of philosophy, Homegames, philosophy.
Are we recording the podcast?
Yeah.
Is this the podcast?
This has been the podcast, brother.
Holy
Oh,
shit.
48 minutes.
All right. Including me leaving for like 2 minutes just a few minutes ago.
Yeah, I was covering up. I was singing the Yams song.
I'm sure that'll be quality content. Well, now that I know, let me mentally prepare that I think okay, so I think what we're going to do for this one is I have a little bit of home game stuff, but I really have life updates because since the last episode I beat Elden Ring, I got COVID, I worked on home games for maybe 4 hours, and that's about it. So it's not like a super home games intensive thing, you know?
Yeah. I think this is a good time to just be chilled out. You know what I mean?
Yeah, like look back at the year. I didn't look back at where we were in January to kind of do a retrospective, to kind of do a proper one. But in my head, we've done a lot this year that maybe feels like behind the scenes stuff. But yeah.
Yeah. And we got into that fight. You know, knives came out. You know, what they say, knives out.
Well, yeah, I mean, I'm going to have to deal with my left foot, like not really being there anymore. But, you know, it is what it is. Like, we're better for it as a result. Our friendship is stronger. So it's my right foot, you know?
Yeah, you know, I have one extra foot now.
For your collection? Yeah.
Yeah. Jesus.
Yeah. One of the things, like, I have this weird plan, or this whole year I've had this weird goal of playing the Sly Cooper trilogy over my winter break because I'm on vacation right now.
That's where this was going.
Well, like 1 year, probably 2011, 2012, I had Christmas break off from school. Mm-hmm. And in that time, I beat every Sly Cooper game from the trilogy, the remastered collection for PS3. And those 3 games are so great. And I because that year was really good for me or whatever, that winter was really good for me, I associated this really good game series with this really good just time in my life. And so I was kind of looking forward to recapturing that. I still have a PS3 and I have that game. I just bought it on eBay, the remastered collection. But I'm not going to play it. And I think that's maturity, you know, is recognizing that I can't recapture that moment. It will always be that moment. And those games are great, but I don't need to kind of like chase that high, you know? I have to make a good current life, you know?
You know what's funny is that slowly we're becoming closer and closer together. That is my view on movies and TV shows. You only watch them once, never again.
See, I think consuming the content, though, is different. I think what I'm specifically looking for here is like chasing the memory, which is wrong. But a good movie, you got to watch that multiple times. Half-Baked, I've seen that movie probably 30, 40 times. Still great. Still want to watch it. Pulp Fiction, same thing. Some movies. And you're going to forget the things and people are going to like reference movies or, you know, if someone's like, oh, you're killing me, Smalls. And then you're like, what is that? And they're like, you ever see The Sandlot? And you're like, yeah, I've seen The Sandlot, but I don't remember that part. Then it's like, well, then you didn't really see the movie. That's like pivotal.
That's not pivotal. That is not
Brother.
pivotal. Pivotal is the lesson learned along the way.
What's the lesson, dude? Go
Lesson
talk to the
learned
neighbor.
is don't be a bitch. Yeah, don't be a bitch. Just get in there and tell your neighbor you hit a ball into their yard.
That's true, and you do get that one like valuable point, which is the lesson. But the movie part of it, the part that's not just like a bullet point of like the moral, you know, the actual story, the flavor all around the story, you know, you're missing it, dude.
That's true, but like a really good movie, I think for me, the best movies I've ever seen, or my favorite movies. Right? Let me backtrack. My favorite movies I like the most.
Mm-hmm.
I think they're I think they give you something to think about for a while, and you don't need to rewatch it. You can just think about it without having to rewatch it.
Yeah, but like The Big Lebowski, that's a movie where so much of the comedy, so much of the not really story, but like I said, the flavor comes from things that you don't really have to, that aren't really like obvious. You have to kind of watch the movie over again, and there are certain details or certain things that someone will say or the way that someone will whatever that just make the whole movie better. I hated that movie the first time I saw it, and then I watched it again and again, and I've seen it maybe like 6-7 times to the point where that movie is on my list of favorite movies or whatever. But I had to watch it again to really get it, you know? You can't just give it a one thing and be like, well, what's the message? Like, what's the point? And, you know, you put on your thinking cap and you're like super Mr. Deep over there, but you don't really like enjoy the movie for being something to be enjoyed, you know?
Yeah, I mean, it is a fine line. You know, you are watch. Sometimes you watch movies. I think that there's like two different kinds of movies, right? Sometimes you're watching Iron Man, right? What are you really gonna get out of Iron Man? Nothing much. A good time, right? And sometimes you're watching like Blade Runner 2049, all right? And when you watch Blade Runner 2049, you are gonna have a good time, but it's gonna leave you like with things to think about. You're gonna really think about them for like months. And you're gonna like stew on them slowly, and like events in your own life, and you'll be like, damn, that makes me like rethink this part of Blade Runner that I saw that one time, you know, months ago. And I think that's what my favorite movies are. Like when you've seen them once and then you think about them like months later, and you're just like, oh, that's like that thing in that movie, and then like that makes me think of this movie a little bit differently. Yeah.
Do you like roller coasters?
Yeah.
Would you ever get on the same roller coaster twice?
Yeah, I have.
Why? Because it's fun.
We had tickets. I mean, I paid money to be there, dog. I'm gonna get my money's worth.
What is this like? Okay, like Disneyland or whatever.
Yeah.
You get on the same thing twice. You get on it the second time because you liked it the first time, and you like wouldn't mind. You wouldn't mind spending that time to get on it again.
Yeah. Well,
So-
okay, hold on. Wait, let me back. Let me. Whoa.
Whoa.
The only time I've ever done a ride twice was when the line was short enough. Like, I would not do a ride that had like more than a 20-minute wait twice. Like, there's no way. That's too much time.
That's what I'm getting at. Because when you listen to, for example, One by Metallica, that song is 8 minutes long. There's a huge build up. There's a story to it. It's about World War I, whatever the hell. There's a whole thing to it. But
True.
At the end of the day, around that 4.5 minute mark when it starts going, that's the best part. Everybody likes it, and it's fun when it gets to that part. You like want to feel it over and over again. It's like fun. But 7 minutes is like a long time. But you'll play it again every now and then. A 20-minute ride, maybe, whatever. But a movie is like 90 minutes. So it has to be like a real fucking sticker, you know, to be worth that time again or whatever. Which I would say a lot of movies are. You just think you're so highly of yourself, dude. You're like, Pulp Fiction, I could never, you know?
I don't know. I feel like I got what I was going to get out of Pulp Fiction. If I watched it again, we've talked about this before, but like to me, it's like percentages, right? If you watch a movie one time and you get 75% of the movie, then that one pass, are you really, you're not going to get the other 25% on the second pass. You might get like 10%. And then on the third pass, maybe you get like 5% more. You're still not at 100%, and you've now committed 3 watches to this movie, where you could just watch an entirely different movie and get 75% out of that movie. And actually, because you got 75% of that first movie, you might be a little bit better about getting more information out of like one sitting of a movie. So now maybe you get like 76% out on that first pass, and you just start like building up that like ability to watch a movie one time and be like, I've gotten like what I was going to get out of this movie emotionally.
Sure. I do that with games these days because I don't want to spend 40 hours playing a game over and over and over again. But we just watched Die Hard for the first time, or I just watched Die Hard for the first time. I technically have seen it 4 times, but I've never looked at it while it was on. Like it's been on in the same room as me.
Yeah.
So Finally watched that for the first time yesterday. Pretty good. Pretty good. I would watch it again, you know? I'd watch it every Christmas time, roughly, you know? That sounds like a movie I'll add to my list, you know? Home Alone, Christmas Vacation, Christmas Story. Do you like any Christmas movies?
I like Home Alone. I watched it when I was like a kid, I guess. And the Grinch Who Stole Christmas.
The animated one or the Jim Carrey one?
No, the animated one is take it or leave it, but the Jim Carrey one is pretty funny.
Synovia would slap you if she heard you say what you just said about the animated one.
What? Why would I watch the animated one when Jim Carrey like is in the Grinch? Like,
you're over here, Mr. Time is Money, dude. The animated one is 30 minutes. The Jim Carrey one's 90 minutes. You get the full story, basically.
Oh, I didn't know that.
There's the animated one doesn't have the whole like subplot of the Grinch going to high school with them or whatever, or elementary school with them.
That really gives the depth to the Grinch's character.
It's true, but it's the story. You know, it's the same thing.
At first, I didn't know that it was that much shorter. That's insane. But also, I know people are like really attached to the animated one. It's not like I dislike it. I just think that the live action one is funnier. There's just more humor in that one.
Yeah, it is more fun to watch. Yeah. I think. Did you have any home game stuff, or did you want to just like, I don't know, what is your approach to this episode? Also, it's episode 123. It's the last of the year
of 2022. It's very fitting that on the 123 brings in 2023. But
whoa, that's weird. I didn't realize that.
Yeah, hell yeah.
Very cool.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't have a ton of time to work on home games coding wise, but I did send you a YouTube video. I don't know if you got the chance to watch it.
Fuck, maybe not. What was it?
It was about the Klein bottle, and I said, don't worry about all this shit. Wait till he gets to the nerd shit at the end.
Oh, I never watched that.
No, that's fair. Listen, it's fine that you didn't watch it. If you are going to watch it, just watch like the last like maybe 8 minutes or something like that. The dude basically is talking about Klein bottles, which are people who don't know. They are like a theoretical 4-dimensional shape that has no volume. So the idea is that it is like a tube that like clicks into itself, and that creates a space with no volume, but has surface area. Right, this surface area no volume, which is impossible in 3 dimensions. Doesn't work like that normally. But at any rate, towards the end of that episode, he's talking about some math stuff that I think would be kind of interesting. One of them was the difficulty of proving that something is inside of an open shape, and proving that something is open over being closed. So the idea that I was thinking about was like, you know, we've talked a lot about like collision, 2-dimensional collision, and how right now it only works with squares, right? Basically, like squares, rectangles. It works with rectangles, really, are the answer. But
we could easily make it work with circles too if we had circles. But yeah, go ahead.
True. Polygons, we'll say, like simple polygons. One of the things that he talked about was that the proof to show that a shape is closed or not closed is actually quite complicated. And so for us to know whether a shape is closed or open probably is non-trivial. I think that's just kind of like the way that goes. And then the other thing that he talked about was how to know if a point is inside of a shape. And so the way you do that is like from that point, you go to a point outside of that shape. And if you've crossed through an even number of lines, that means you are outside of the shape. And if you cross an odd number of lines, you are inside of the shape. Does that make you follow what I'm picking up on?
Yeah, I think I've heard that as like a way to solve one of those like whatever like math kind of puzzle things before or whatever. But I have forgotten most math, like you have forgotten most movies.
First of all, I only forget about my own life, not about movies. I memorize movies, but also fair. Anyway, this is kind of like tangentially related, but from watching that from watching that YouTube video and learning about like how complicated that kind of work is, I think that maybe, how do you feel about, this is like theoretical, looking into the future, right? Crystal ball, telescope, you know, the earth is flat. That's a joke. The last one was a joke. um, Standardizing a hitbox, like creating a hitbox node, basically. That is a square, a type of node that is a square or a rectangle, rather.
So you mean like providing a way for game developers to, in a general way, provide hitboxes for their entities so they can have complex shapes that are, to simplify the math and to make it more performant, have underlying boxes for the basically the polygons?
Yeah, so that people can have arbitrarily complicated polygons, and then there's like a fill with hitbox function. And really what we do is we construct many small rectangles inside of the shape, and then we look for hitboxes using those rectangles. Because I don't think that we're going to easily be able to do collision except for with squares. Or rectangles. Or circles, I guess.
That seems fine. I think it's like not super high priority because it seems like a performance thing and a feature thing to like have proper. We technically support other polygons now, like arbitrary point-to-point line drawing. So maybe we can just like disable hit detection for that, or have a very simple one where we basically draw a bounding box around it and just check for that, whatever, for collision, which would be wrong but would be workable. But we don't really have much need for it in general, so I think it's kind of whatever. Maybe one day when I can find like a good interface, or maybe even a way to handle that stuff behind the scenes and say, okay, well, there's a shape here, and so we can like have a smart, fast way of figuring out where we actually want to check for collision instead of having to explicitly define the boxes underneath or whatever. But yeah, whatever. It's all math.
Hell yeah. It is all math. Yeah, I just wanted to bring that up because that was part of the home games thing of the week for me when I was watching that, and I was like, oh,
no,
this is related.
Yeah, that's interesting. The collision thing made me think because over the past week or two, I've been thinking about ways to make this more performant. Since the whole thing is, like I talked about last episode, how we have this extra. When you want to play a game publicly, there's another server in the mix, and so everything gets slower significantly because of the network. And so if we could optimize the network stuff as much as possible and do the whole partial re-rendering like I've talked about before, where the way it works today, anytime anything changes in the game, we send the entire game back to you, every single person, every single time. So like, you have a red square moving on a black background. Every time the red square moves, we send you the black background too, instead of the client kind of figuring out that it can kind of remove or move the square itself, just knowing about the square itself. So to get that to work, we actually need to have detection collision detection, because we need to be able to say, well, yes, the red square updated, but what visually collides with the red square, so we can send back like the proper layers that need to be rendered on this thing, right? Like if you have if you have like basically pieces of the screen that are updating, and then one chunk here moves and then one chunk moves, you need to send the data for everything in this kind of every layer that you're looking at here, so all of them can update correctly. Otherwise you just have like the top layer changing, which is incorrect, or what. Anyway, you need math. It's more math. And so there are probably things to do there, like for optimization, but I think what it is today is probably good enough for a release of like regular games that aren't super crazy. We don't need we don't need to go super crazy on like the specific good math and like whatever, putting a bunch of time into that.
Yeah,
if it works,
for sure.
It works.
Yeah, that makes sense. I agree with that stuff, and I like it.
Yeah. So for me, what I was working on for the past, well, really just today, because it was like my first real day of vacation today. So I started working on Homepad, which is my standalone controller library that I'm going to use for home games. So for people unfamiliar, and I'm sure this also applies to you, Yazeed, but the gamepad API that is provided to you by browsers, like if I plug a PlayStation controller into my computer and see what a browser lets me do with it, it's pretty straightforward, but it's pretty hard to comprehend what it's telling you. Like basically there is a gamepad object that has it's called axes, which are kind of the sticks. And think about a controller. A controller can have an arbitrary amount of sticks, or it could have none, or it could have one or two, or whatever, more than that. So that's the axes values, and then those contain arrays that basically just have the x and y value at any time, right? Since they're analog sticks, they're not just in the center or in one direction. They're kind of any value along any axis. So that's like one of the way that they expose that. And then they have a buttons value, which has like the pressed value of every button. And if it's an analog button, it also gives you that. Like think about the trigger on a PlayStation controller. There's, kind of a different phases of motion or whatever. So you can track all that stuff as well. But it gives these to you in like a weird way where, for example, the X button on the PlayStation maps to button 1, or, the square button maps to button 2 or whatever. But it's kind of hard to know if I plug in an Xbox controller, if I can just consistently track button 2, or if I plug in a Switch controller, is Y button 2 still? I really don't know. And if it is, I need some way to kind of know that and be confident that my gamepad will be supported in the way that I want it to be, or that if I can plug in some other sort of gamepad, I would be able to map it the way that I want to, and say, well, actually, I want button 2 to be circle. So that was one of my thinkings or one of my thoughts for Homepad, was to make it so I can kind of add a very simple, like more readable layer in between you, the programmer, and the actual configuration of every controller. But one of the other things that I didn't really think about too hard until I started actually writing the code and realized that it didn't make much sense. But the way that it works now is you have to query the gamepad. So like on our client today for the gamepad support, we have request animation frame, which is basically just saying, hey, browser, I want to give me a cycle to paint stuff. And then you do it, you render, and then you just ask the browser again, hey, give me a cycle to paint stuff. And you keep asking. Every time you ask, we poll the controller. We say, hey, what is the state of the buttons? What is the state of the sticks right now? And we kind of pull that information and then apply it to the game. We send it to the server. It'll apply whatever movement, whatever you're doing, and change the game state from there. But what I wanted to do was have listeners. So instead of having to poll, I wanted to be able to say something like homepad.addListener, give it a function, and then every time a button is pressed, say for example, A pressed, A depressed, or X pressed, X depressed. But in this case, it would be like a generic button 1, button 2, button whatever, to be controller agnostic. But that doesn't really make much sense in the context of like a physical thing. Like if I press the button, that is technically an event, which I guess is fine. But if I want to move the stick, if I just go from center to right, how many events is that? Is that one event, like from the center to the rightmost thing? Is it 2? How granular am I going to be in that polling time? Then it's like, well, then that becomes a thing where I have to tweak it. Maybe per controller, I have like a polling rate or whatever, or event. It all just seemed like the wrong way to do it. And so what Homepad ended up being is essentially just, like I said, this way to just map controllers to generic inputs. So it's this little very light layer between Homegames and the browser, to just let us, like I said, have more of a robust support for different types of gamepads without really even caring about what they are, or caring about what tweaks the user has made to their config or whatever. So yeah, that's basically it. It kind of works. It's like pretty low on features, and it's only got the PlayStation 4 controller support right now. So that's one thing I'm adding. But yeah, that's that. And then once I finish that, going on to the kind of final list of stuff before, 6-7 months from now, when we kind of send this off to either sink or swim or whatever.
Either home or dome.
To home or dome, yeah.
Yeah. I have a kind of a question for you. When you were doing the polling, where you were running into the polling idea, did you consider maybe creating like like presets basically, like think like small, medium, large, where like large is all the way to the right, medium is like half step and all the way to the right, and then small is like third, all the way to the right. And then there's also like the ability to add in a number, which is the polling rate. Or would that just be like so ridiculous and also like basically like pointless at a certain point?
We could. I mean, we could do something like that. It would just be kind of more configuration and make everything trickier when I think most people probably don't want to deal with that. And I had another thing. At the end of the day, we still need to poll it. Like, it doesn't provide an event API, so we would still need to be polling and then say, like, well, how often do you want us to fire events? We're still doing this, like, inefficient thing. So I think at the end of the day, I'd rather just leave it simpler and say, well, here's the thing for you to get the gamepad state at any point with kind of a more, instead of an array of whatever stuff with Boolean values, it's just a map. So it's like, is face button 1 pressed? Yes, no. Is stick 1, or what is the state of stick 1? What is the state of this trigger? And like I said, it's just a way to take any arbitrary gamepad input and map it to a thing that Homegames can consistently see, recognize, and kind of like track as input.
Doesn't this put the polling on the person making the game then?
Yeah. That's what I'm saying. Like, all we can do is provide the API to ask for the transform data. At the end of the day, like, that's all we can really do.
Why is that better than providing the polling for them?
Why would we provide, if we can provide an API that says give me the game info and you can ask it however often you want, why would we have an opinion on how often you can or what you should be doing?
I see. Okay. So this is more about controllability than like usability then.
Well, it wouldn't.
Sorry, go ahead.
It wouldn't be the game developer. It'd be us. It'd be the client configuration to say, like, here is the config I want for my controller. Like, a game developer is just saying, yeah, my game, if you give me face button 1 pressed, I'll do something. But they don't have to care about anything else. If you want to say, like, analog stick is at this point, I can do something, but I'm not requesting it. The client is polling the gamepad and sending that to me.
Oh, so a person making a game doesn't have to set up the polling themselves. That's still being done by Homegames code. Like the polling to get inputs, that's still being ran by Homegames code.
This is just for the controller stuff. So like this is just for give me the state of the gamepad plugged into the client. So the client will still get that information on each request animation frame and still whatever. It's just that instead of having to manually do this thing for each type of gamepad that we have now, like Xbox 360 controller, then do this. If this, then if literally like if statements that say if input is equal to the string A, then treat it like it's the keyboard input W or whatever. It's dumb. So to remove all that stuff, it's just the client's ability to kind of manage that stuff, but it's still sending it across to the game at the same rate. It's still just a player input at the end of the day, and the game can handle it however it wants.
I see. Okay. I thought it was like I thought, yeah. Okay, I understand that now. Okay, that sounds good. I like that.
Yeah. No, yeah. It's just a configuration layer, like readability type stuff. So, yeah, it's a standalone thing. I've been wanting to make it for years, mostly just because I think it's fun to, like, I have like 4 or 5 different types of controllers. Like I have a Amazon Luna controller. I have a Google, what is it called? Stadia, which is so crazy. We never talked about it on the podcast, but the fact that Stadia is over and we talked about the start of it on this podcast is nuts. Like this podcast outlived Stadia.
Let's go. The lettuce lived longer or whatever.
Wait, what? The lettuce lived longer?
Yeah.
What does that mean?
Oh, you don't follow British memes.
Fuck no, I don't, dude. British memes?
Yeah,
no, dude, they eat beans with eggs over there.
They do. They're fucking crazy people. But they had a PM named Liz Truss, and somebody was like, "Who's gonna last longer, Liz Truss in office or this lettuce?" And the lettuce won. And so it became like a meme.
Got it. We're lettuce.
But-
I get it.
Yeah.
But yeah, no. So just having like these different types of controllers, like an Xbox controller, a PlayStation controller, and knowing that I can plug them all in and have something recognize them, like it's just fun to me for whatever reason. So I will be doing that, plugging different controllers into my laptop, looking at what button is what, and then adding like basic configuration files, which is very fun to me. Another thing I've realized about myself over the past couple weeks is I truly love updating software and firmware. Like I love a Mac OS software update. I love an iPhone update. I fucking hate a Windows update. But everything else, like I love updating Steam games. I haven't played most of my Steam games, but I have hundreds of them installed. But I love opening Steam, going to the library and seeing that there's games queued for updates. I'll click all those shits for right now, dude, knowing I'm never going to play this game.
You're a wild man.
Learning a lot about myself, dude. But yeah, that's it for my home game stuff. I guess, yeah, like I said, huge accomplishment for me, beating Elden Ring. Very excited about that. I spent 80 hours beating Elden Ring.
Oh my God.
I really, honestly, truly think that is it is the end of that era for me. You know, like it took me 9 months or 8 months to put 80 hours into a game. Simple math. My realistic rate at which I can play games is about 10 hours a month, or 10 hours a month. Feels about right, you know. I just don't want to play one game a year. That fucking sucks ass, dude. I don't want to do that. So maybe Elden Ring is the last one of those games I'll beat because it's fun, but it's not really worth it.
That's fair. Fair. That's crazy. I think I play more games I think I'm at like 2 to 1. 2 of my weeks is equal to 1 of your month.
Yeah, that's still not that much. Like compared to us in high school, dude. When Halo 3 came out, I played probably 5 hours of games a day, and then the weekends it was probably like at least 8. Whereas now even 20 hours a week is what you're saying for you. That's not the craziest, you know. It's a lot, but it's not crazy. I'm
saying 20 hours a month, dog. Hold on. Let's back up.
Yeah. 20 hours a month. So I remember like my gamer score is pretty high on my Xbox profile. I've had the same Xbox profile for the past 15 years. And people used to regularly tell me to get a life. And well, that's fine. But I truly did not know what that meant. Like, people say get a life. I would always just think like, what the fuck are you talking about? I go to school. You know what I mean? It's like I go to school. But then it's like, wow, okay, well, I really didn't have a life, you know? I didn't have anything to do. And I didn't even realize that I didn't have anything to do when I was 15.
Yeah.
I don't know, man.
That's fair. I mean, I think if I was in high school and I did my 1 month with no video games thing, I would have died. I actually would have died. I wouldn't know what to do with myself.
Yeah.
But I thought it was okay. I mean, aside from a hit to my mental health, I thought it was fine.
Yeah. One time my mom took my PS2 away because I was such an asshole, and that was one of the hardest months of my life. So I imagine I'm surprised I made it.
That's crazy. I've never had my video games taken away from me as a youth.
Oh yeah.
I've only opted into that myself as an adult.
Yeah. No, I was not the best child sometimes. But yeah, that's pretty much it for the year. Like I said, it's been kind of a blur, but we've made progress. This is the last full year where this whole thing is like this. We will continue working on home games. We will do the final things that we need to do to make this everything that we think it can be. And we will see how it goes from there. And we will launch this thing in June or July and see what happens. And yeah, but I imagine this podcast won't look the same in a year. it'll be like a different setup, a different vibe, different goals, different everything. So it might not happen as often, or it might not be the same or whatever after that. But this next 6-7 months, I really can't see much else. For this whole year, for the past like 4 or 5 months, I really haven't been able to look ahead more than a couple weeks, just because it feels like, I don't know, life is so weird, and I'm like so short-sighted. So I'm gonna take this vacation and like refocus. But yeah, trying to look ahead for the next 6-7 months. I want this shit to be cool. I so badly want this shit to be done. By the time we launch this in April, it'll be like May. It'll be like 5 years of me working on this in some way, 4 years of me working on this in like a real way, and 3 years ish of the podcast. So, 2.5, I think it'll be at that point. So, fucking weird, but I'm looking forward to it. I'm looking forward to doing work. One of the things on my to-do list, it's written on the back, but my final list thing, which I'm not going to go through everything, but one of them is TypeScript. So in the end, you won, Yazeed. Fuck you. But we will do that next year. I'm looking forward to all this stuff. Thank you, Yazeed. Thank you, everybody listening. Thank you to Tynan, who did our music, Nightan Bandcamp. We're on Twitter, Homegames.io, homegames.io website. Thank you very much. We will see you next year.
Thank you. Have a good holiday season.
Merry Christmas and Happy New Year and all that. Goodbye.